Welcome back to What Have You. I'm Rachel Jankovic.
I'm Becca Merkel.
And we are just diligent here to podcast today.
You'll be excited to hear we're in a big change of scene today because we're in Rachel's car.
We're in exactly the same spot that we were only like 2 days ago or something. We're being so on it.
We're being really on it because I'm about to be out of town for a week. And we are thinking in advance. We are recording ahead of time.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Big job us. So
I think we're boasting a little too much. It's probably going to go wrong.
Yeah, probably. So I had a topic that somebody sent me this, and I seen it on the internet. I'm going to see. I don't know that it will really play. It's the video that was a message from the gay community. Did you see it?
Oh, my land.
Did you watch it?
Just enough to see how grotesque it was about, like, we're
coming for your children.
We're going to convert
and
your kids.
all of it to the tune of a Frozen theme song or something. Oh. And it's like, we'll convert your children. You're like, no, you're the worst. This is the worst. But I still wanted to talk about that because I think if you're one of the, just in summary, it was like a video message from the San Francisco Gay Men's Choir or something. Where
I think that's a little, Gay Men's Choir, who are they to draw lines that it should only be gay men?
I feel like
I think that was judgy of
what
them.
What a judgy and
I don't think that was open or welcoming.
Exactly. So this little song is about how
choir.
You're trying to keep your children from being corrupted, but we're going to convert your children. And they're little, I would assume, where they're trying to claim that they don't mean we're just going to be pedophiles and molest your children, is that they're saying we'll convert them to love and harmony. You know, we're going to convert your children. And there's some really, it's basically saying no matter what you try to do, your children are going to be accepting and loving and towards the gay community. And it was a really gross video from the perspective of it being so open with what they're planning to do. And it is a tragic video because of how successful they've been, that they have enough pomp in their they feel successful at this. They feel confident at it. They have plenty of success to point to already. And they are confidently bragging and boasting to parents, basically just to conservative parents who want to keep their kids from being corrupted. They are just saying, well, you kid, there's nothing you can do about it. We're going to turn you into an ally yet. Like, we're going to do this.
It's like those creepy "We Are Everywhere" signs.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, so there's that. But I'm assuming if you saw it and you're a Christian mother, that it is unsettling. I mean, it gives you the sense of yuckaduck bad. I mean, it's horrifying to have someone say, no matter what you are teaching your children, we're going to win. But the thing that made me laugh about it is that it brought back a flood of warm memoirs.
I was just
didn't it?
And
this is why I felt like we needed to talk about it, because I was like, I remember, I'm guessing I was in junior high. How old do you think you were when this happened?
I think I was probably mid-teens.
Yeah, we were somewhere in there. So
I was probably 15.
There was a proposed bill of some kind. I don't even know. It was Proposition 8, something like that. And our dad, as a pastor who would oppose it, was asked to speak at some forum of some kind.
It was City Hall. It was like at the...
Was it a City Hall meeting, though? It was at City Hall. Whatever it was, he was asked to speak. But he was speaking as the opposition to a bill that was part of the gay agenda. So whatever it was, I think it was about equal marriage rights.
I remember that it was Proposition 8, because I remember they were chanting 2468, Idaho's too great for hate. Maybe I'm just assuming that it was 8, but maybe it was 1. I don't know. Maybe it was 1.
I think that it was, well, whichever. Anyways, it was a time, so Dad was asked to come be on this panel, but he was there as a representative of the one who thinks you shouldn't be doing this. So he was much loathed and detested in that time. And I remember getting a mailing at our house that was from like the Lesbian Avengers or something.
The Lesbian Avengers were flown in,
they came just
to protest.
Just sit on that group name for a minute. But the Lesbian Avengers, some of their belief system trickled our way in a pamphlet. Do you remember? I mean, it was some kind of the statement of lesbian avengerhood. It was very disturbing. I mean, like, the things that I remember from it was...
I don't remember the pamphlet, so...
It was like a flyer. But somehow we got a lesbian avenger flyer that declared upon it, it was like, we will molest your daughters in the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was that kind of thing. And it was, you see it, and you just ask yourself, what? Like, what on earth? Because, A, that's horrifying. But B, who writes that up as a statement of faith and puts it on a flyer and mails it around to people? I mean, like, it was just really weird. And this was all around the same time. So we had that little gift of an informational packet at our house.
That at the meeting, was this not the one where the man turned up in a loincloth? No, that was a different one.
Okay, so anyways, so this was a big time hot sauce meeting. And we went there to watch it, but it was really a time. And it was probably my first real trip. I told you, sorry, it's a little, do you want me to roll down your, it's not reliable. My AC is not being reliable. A
little breeze would be good. All right, go ahead.
And I think it was my first real trip out into this kind of situations, because we went in there and the room was so packed that there was only standing room. And we were standing up against the wall in this room that was throbbing with rage. I mean, like, really no other way of putting it.
No.
At some point, a man did an iconic, if only we'd been a good photographer and been there to catch it, but a man in the front row, so freaking mad at Dad, and he stood up. I mean, we are talking like scarlet colored with veins bursting. I mean, his neck is like
puffs of smoke.
Veins. I mean, it was like, you're thinking this man is going to have a heart attack. It's not all right. And he is flipping Dad off with every piece of energy he could find. And in his other hand, he is clutching the sign that says, "No hate here." And it was so iconic. It was so, like...
You just wish you could have captured the image.
It was just like, wow. Like, that's an amazing moment. But after this event, as we shuffled through the hostile crowds, Dad, it was a hostile group. Dad had a note. He was ready to have the cops called because things were looking to be out of hand. Yep. It was a violent affair. Well, it was violent it didn't actually turn violent, but it was really dancing on the brink of
and it was this
brawl.
Packed foyer afterwards. And I remember one of the Lesbian Avengers, there was a Christian attorney who had also spoken. Mm-hmm. And I remember her just screaming in his face, but he was quite a lot taller than she was, so she was like looking up with this scream face on and telling him that it really was a poetic failure. She had gotten herself worked up about how this is going to be on your head and this is judgmental of you and you're hateful and you're wicked and everything else. And then she went off on this sort of a tangent about the blood is on your hands. And then she had it run away with herself.
Oh, I remember this.
The blood is on your hands, and it's dripping, and it's going to drip on the floor, and you're going to slip in it.
No, I think she said, you're going to slip in it, buddy.
Yeah.
I think buddy came out at the end. And the blood that is on your hands is slipping onto the floor, and it's pooling on the floor, and you're going to slip in it, buddy.
I just remember
and if you're asking yourself,
like, wow.
If you're asking yourself, in what school were these strange Wilson children trained? This was one of our field trips that we went on. Well, okay, and this is the part that all of this was just to build up to this moment that we had where we were standing by Dad and it was another woman screaming at Dad.
Yeah. I don't think it was even the same one, but maybe it was.
No, I don't think so. I think it was a different
one. But
woman.
we were kind of observing it from afar. And I just remember feeling like, oh, I wouldn't have ended there. I felt like that was
slipping in it was not your best. And Buddy did not come off well. And, but
we were kind of looking at the rhetoric of it.
We were like, wow, this is something.
I would have had that checked by your peer review group.
But then we were standing there, and somebody was yelling at Dad, and all in his face. But then she began gesturing at us as we stood there.
The two of us.
And wasn't Nate there too? Either way.
Yeah, but I don't think she was.
She was like, in 10 years, your kids are ours. They're ours. And we were in a very hostile situation. And I remember it feeling that was unsettling in the sense that you're looking at this person and like, whoa. Like, why do you think you're going to have us in 10 years? Yeah. But the reason I bring this whole story up is just to point out to you that 10 years has come and gone. And none of us have been ideologically captured by the lesbian Avengers or their affiliates.
No.
It was not.
No. We remain unimpressed.
Yeah.
With their rhetoric and their packaging.
But what I was saying at the beginning is, however, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of Christian kids have been.
Yep.
Right? And this is what I just think is important, that we just take a moment and reflect on the fact that they don't have to be.
No.
Your children do not have to be easy pickings for these seagulls and crows. Like, you can not leave them vulnerable. And it reminds me of fast forward some years from that point, and I was working at a crisis pregnancy center, and there was a lot of materials that went down at the crisis pregnancy center at that time that I did not participate ideologically in. There was a lot of like, here, watch this video to be trained. Yeah. And I would be like, what? I don't agree with this. It was my first big, like, ecumenical excursion into working with other Christians where you think, but this is so dumb. This is such a horrible idea. But one of these, I remember talking with the woman who was training me, who had me watch this video. And I was just like, the thing is it's not true. Like, the problem I have with this video is that it's a falsehood. It's not just like, not the way I would have presented the information. It's untrue. And so what I remember from this video, first of all, it was a woman who introduced herself to everything. It's actually pretty funny, so I feel like I have to tell you some tidbits from the opening of this video, just so you can gather with me your feelings. It opens with a woman being like, I am here. I spend over half the year flying around to different church groups to speak on abstinence to the youth groups and to show them slides of STDs, which is one of her main activities, I think, trying to instill some fear in the youth groups of America. And she was like, and my husband is a great Mr. Mom at home to our kids. So they have a bunch of little kids at home, but she is nonetheless on the circuit of showing STD slides to other people's children for most of the year.
The thing about that is you just want to say, nope. You've
cancel
stepped out
everything.
On the wrong road.
No, but then it got even worse. She was like, and when my... this is like, it's like, how many ways does this presentation fail? You're like, this one lights up every red light. She then says, and when my son was going to go on his first prom at the age of like 12.
You want to throw a flag there too.
You're like, wait.
You're just like, but no.
No, but it shoots the moon. It shoots the moon because that was only the opening. When my 12-year-old son was going to go on his first prom, I took his date out in advance.
No. And
I said,
no.
If you so much as lay a hand on my son. Yeah, okay, so, wow. I mean, like, you just have to really try to get your mind around what kind of a behemoth of a woman this is.
Also, We've run into gender confusion.
In such a bad way. Such a bad way.
We've gotten all the pieces.
Everything is wrong. Like, Mom is full-time elsewhere working with this weird niche job while Dad is home with the kids. But she's going to take the time out of her busy schedule to take a 12-year-old girl out and threaten her to not corrupt her son. Okay. So all of this is like the stuff that goes by in the beginning of the video. Like, this is not even the meat. This is not even the real heart and soul of what we were supposed to learn.
No.
But I did feel like I was learning everything I needed to know just right. You know, just as it goes by you. You know, you're like, it can't be that this is the person we're putting in charge of things. And then she said, and this is the one that where I just felt, at the time I think I was 18.
Okay.
So I myself was one of the youth of today when at the time, I was not this
you were in the target
I was not this old, hardened, married woman at that time. I was myself who she would have wanted to be speaking to. And she said in this, she's like, we have to all know that our children are facing pressure to have sex every day.
And you're
pressure.
Like, well,
and I said, and that was
shouldn't be.
This was the place where I think I finally said, no, this woman is not on the trail of the answers. She is not because what she was trying to say
is, put them somewhere else.
They are facing pressure to have sex every day, and that's why we have to be about this business. Yeah, this is why we have to do this. And I was just thinking, the thing is that other things are wrong. If your kids are facing pressure to have sex every day, you have failed monumentally.
Yeah.
And although I don't think my feedback was well received on this point, because I was just like, the problem is, in that context, if that's truly what's happening to Christian kids, and I am not here to say that it isn't happening to some Christian kids.
Right.
I believe it is. But I believe that in the places where that's happening to Christian kids, we have a massive failure of parents, of churches, the failure is that you have managed to have your 13-year-old girl in the backseat of a boyfriend who wants to have sex, car, in the night, somewhere. Like, so many hurdles have to be cleared for your kids to be in a situation where their friends are pressuring them this way, where they have a boyfriend who's pressuring them, where they don't have parents who know where they are, where they are not being, where
they're probably getting disgusting sex ed classes every day
at
public schools.
So the problem is,
from pagans,
how available have you made your children for that temptation, and how difficult have you made their walk with God? Like, if you were saying, I want you to live as a pure kid, but I'm going to put you in a place where your chances of being successful are slim to none.
No, it's really like if you had your house completely overrun with mold and rot. And so you're like, this is so important. Here is my mission. I am called to this. I run around with some contact paper and I cover it up. I cover it up.
Slap it out on anything I see.
Full time. I stick the contact paper on it.
I am here to try to cover up the actual gaping wound that is hurting children.
And so the thing is I do feel like, of course, we live in a very corrupt society. Schools are atrocious. I'm sure there's lots of parents whose kids really are there. And I do think you do have a crazy mission field of teens in this country who have been utterly defiled by the educational system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, they were already full of their own original sin, but then along comes the person whom it would be better to have a millstone.
Exactly. I was going to say, we all have original sin, and yet Scripture teaches about people who cause little ones to stumble.
Right. And
both
those
things are possible.
Teachers who were in there,
the ultra pervs, apparently.
The ultra pervs who want to talk about that kind of thing with kids, that's just vile. So anyway, you do have a bunch of people who have had a really terrible thing done to them by the educational system in America. And I do think that there's a huge mission field there. And there's a lot of people who should be trying to, reach out there. However, the people who are in that terrible situation should not be the children of saints.
No, and this is...
And if they are, what are they doing there?
Because you think about when Amy Carmichael was in India rescuing the little girls who were being forced into temple prostitution, right?
Yeah.
You don't do that work by getting your own daughters into the temple prostitution circuit.
Right.
Okay? You just don't. That's not the technique.
And somebody needs to be there to help those
people. Do people need to reach out to them? Yes. Do you do it by getting your own kids in there? False. Wrong. Do over. Do you not think that this is the way to do it? And don't think that you have the capacity.
But also, you don't fix the problem by trying to scare them about STDs. You fix the problem with Christ and their need for a savior, and then get out of this situation, and let's pull you out of this hellhole that is the public school system of America.
Just to be totally clear, in case any of you thought that I don't have a problem with 12-year-old girls trying out their sexuality on a 12-year-old boy, I do. But the idea of helicoptering in a mother at that point, it seems like the weirdest kind of... It's like drawing lines. You take your kids to the park and there are big curly slides and being like, we're here to ride the curly slides. And then randomly drawing lines on the slide and be like, you can't come past this. No. Now get on the slide
and
do not cross this line.
Yeah.
And then being like, I'll show you scary pictures of what might happen if when you're sailing down the slide, you accidentally cross this border that I arbitrarily made.
Right.
Well, so what I'm trying to say is when this video tells me Christian kids in America are facing pressure to have sex every day, and I just said, I'm not.
They shouldn't be.
I said, let me raise my hand here. I am a teenager of America today, and I have never faced pressure to have sex a day in my life. And the point that I was making to the woman, as I said, a lewd man on the street is not pressure. That's not, or accidentally happening upon something gross. That's not pressure. To talk about a corrupting pressure is to mean that things are far closer to you.
Yeah.
That means you have, your best friend is gonna, there's some kind of blackmail going on, or your boyfriend is threatening something, or you're way more vulnerable to something.
I have a metaphor here. I mean, we need to come back to this thought, but I have thought before, so when Ben was doing this kind of gospel Bible study, weekly Bible study with a lot of people. Oh,
did I get it?
On my leg.
I tried.
Rachel.
There's a fly.
She tried to squish a fly on my leg.
But I
feel
failed.
Very offended about
I failed.
that.
With Cannery Row.
Anyways, I remember the funniness of the kind of the world of people who are kind of between prison sentences, essentially, who are, many of them not saved, some of them baby Christians, and the sort of how was your week? It'd be I was doing really good, I was reading the Bible, and then on Wednesday I slipped and sold meth.
They're walking with the Lord, doing awesome, stabbed a guy.
Yeah, so you have, that's a particular level, but if I, in my daily life, decided, you know what, I'm gonna get some meth, I have no idea where I would go to find it. In this town, there are people who would be able to hook me up with meth, but to be honest, I think I'd have to go to sort of the most sketchy pizza place and see if I could talk to the man in the back and say, hey, do you know where I could find some meth? Because I'm not
sure the pizza place would even get you there. I think you might have to try harder.
Even know. I mean,
you might have to wait outside gas stations for a long time. Yeah.
These days, I could get pot quite easily by driving to Pullman. However, I'm not in the circle where on Wednesday I accidentally took meth again. I would really have to take a field trip and exert all of my mental energy to try to dust up some meth.
It doesn't mean that nobody falls into that sin that way. Some people fall into the sin through a long and purposeful trip downwards.
Sure. But I'm just saying, but you could live in the kind of life where you are surrounded by it at all times, and you really could accidentally just end up doing that on Wednesday. Right. And what I'm saying is there are so many other factors involved that get you so close to that sin that it's just a little slip and you're in it. And your children should not live in an environment where they're just trembling on the brink of accidentally sleeping around 24/7.
Well, and the reason is because your children should be being brought up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, which means the nurture and admonition of the Lord is the opposite of the nurture and admonition of sexual immorality.
Now, let's just say, though, that I also had a steady diet of entertainment that made me feel like meth was the most glamorous, amazing thing I could possibly do. I could see then going out and saying, where can I find some? I really need to try this. Or being
so highly tuned to that radio frequency that literally the only thing you can think about is that, which does make you hone in on
and then
opportunities.
You are going to go put yourself in that situation. And I think that right there is another piece where some people, you might be homeschooling your kids, you might not have them in the sex ed classes, they might be completely in one way cordoned off from that kind of a world, but do they just have a steady stream of smut coming in the door through your television?
I think one of the lines in that weird song that we opened up with tagging was about how they'll look on the internet.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. That's the kind of area where it's like, Christian parents, it's not enough to have your kids in a Christian school or to have your kids it's not sufficient to just have sheltered them from most things.
Think about how you're supposed to, when you lie down, when you stand up, when you walk along the way. It is not enough to just be like, well, we mailed off our tuition check again this month, check. We did that. You have to be like constantly involved, and you can't assume that when you have a fire hose pumping into your house of really a lot of sleazy debauch, that's not going to have an impact. But like we said last week too, you might be like totally nothing. We don't watch movies, we don't listen to music, we don't talk to people.
But sin comes from the heart of man.
And sin will come from within. And if you're not actually pastoring your children, then you're just going to have problems no matter what you do externally. But this point that you're making is there's a lot of things you can do to actively ensure that you will lose your children. And one of those is sending them off to the state every single day for 13 years of their life.
For their nurture and admonition
because the state that is clearly vile in every direction, and then you say, here, I would love it if you would teach my child.
Why don't you raise them
about life and love and everything?
Yeah. And I guess the thing that I was trying to say is there's really two aspects of like this video. There's two things that I think bear thinking on. One is that this is a very real threat and a very real hazard, and something that every Christian parent should be actively aware of, right? Mm-hmm. You should be actively aware that the world is full of evil and things that could ensnare your children and drag them away from you, right? Like you should be aware of that. And on the other hand, you should be able to laugh of like, what makes you think you have any handles on God's children? Yeah. Like, you don't actually have this random man from San Francisco does not actually have any of the power he thinks that he has over God's children.
Neither height, nor depth, nor breadth,
nor principalities, nor powers,
nor San Francisco gay men's choirs.
Nothing can separate us from the love of God.
And so if you are taking care that your children are there, then you can trust God
Yes, you can trust God, and also don't slack off. Don't think like it doesn't matter. But I remember it feeling so weird to me, this whole video about the epidemic of immorality among Christian children. But don't worry, guys. We got our best girl on it, whoever she is. This was so many years ago now. I bet she's out of the business now. But the point is that was so silly to me, because the question was, where are these children's fathers? Where are their mothers? Where is the church they go to? Where is their, there's an awful lot.
The ones that don't, well, if she's going to youth groups, that's a very valid question. I was thinking if she's just going around to public schools, but that's not what she was doing.
She was going to youth groups.
She was speaking exclusively to
the
but Christian teens.
I'm sure that what it was is the youth groups of kids who are all in public schools.
Oh, yeah.
And whose parents have checked out significantly, but they're mailing their kids off to the youth group in the hope that will compensate for how much parenting they're not doing.
Right.
But my point was that this rebuke is for someone else. These parents need to step it up. These people,
Yeah.
But I will just put this out there, that I do think, there are a lot of ways in which parents need to be, it's like we're really afraid of some things that we shouldn't be afraid of, and then not at all concerned about things that you absolutely should be way more concerned about. Deeply more concerned about the kind of insidious little things that are coming in. And I feel like on our podcast, we pretty often talk about entertainment standards. We pretty often are mentioning this, but I think it's really important. Dad makes this point a lot, that he thinks there are sometimes sins that if it comes up suddenly, that there's a teen boy who's really no, that sounds like I'm misrepresenting what Dad would say. He would just say that if a parent is secretly indulging sin, it comes out in the family in a different way.
Yeah.
Even if the child didn't know about it.
Sure.
If a dad is secretly struggling with porn or indulging in porn, it's going to come out in his sons, whether they know that he is or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? There's going to be a fruit.
And it should be clear that we're talking about indulging it, covering it up, lying about it, hiding it.
Yes. But the point is that a lot of parents treat it like they are qualified to be deep in the worldly wallows, but they are that'd be dangerous for our kids.
Right.
But it's fine for us.
Yeah.
We enjoy the F-bomb.
We don't mind nudity.
We are good at it. We like it. We learn all kinds of things from these dirty shows that we watch or whatever. And acting like that's not actually going to have fruit in your kid's life, because at the very least what you're showing is an interest in and availability for this sort of sin, and a kind of lack of seriousness about it.
Yeah.
A lack of we actually think.
Well, and to a certain extent, if all of your favorite characters in fictional contexts are deeply immoral people, then you are basically saying, my favorite people are really immoral. So if my kids happen to be,
Right. I have no actual conviction on this point.
And it is weird too, because I think people can get attached to fictional characters like they were their friends, and tolerate things in their pretend friends that one hopes they wouldn't tolerate if it was their real friend,
Exactly.
So
you hope that you would have an obligation, if this was not a fictional character, you would have an obligation to rebuke them, to plead with them to give up their evil ways, then to cut them off as a friend, to not actually be hanging out with them.
Right.
But if you're just tuning in for the next episode, you don't feel that you are enjoying someone else's sin without any responsibility yourself, because it's fake.
And I do think that there are ways around it. I don't think you have to have every character in anything you ever watch as a born again and faithful Christian. Otherwise, we won't watch it. I don't think you have to do that. But you do have to take sin seriously in your fiction. And you don't want to throw yourself into admiration of a character who is really not admirable.
Right.
Or whatever.
And don't think that that a lot is not being accomplished through entertainment. Like, that's been the primary, and if culture shaping was a football game, the most successful play that is run on us over and over and over again is entertaining us with them making touchdowns on us. Right? Like,
absolutely.
With getting us to veg out and not resist, and engage.
I think there's a lot of Christians who have kids where the world has got its hooks in really deep.
Uh-huh.
And there's a deep pull towards worldliness. And if you want to look around for how could that have happened, how did that hook get in there? It's like, well, I have a lot of money on the fact that it was probably your entertainment standards that started it.
Well,
and
also,
it might be music.
But you also have to think about it in terms of the fact that you may be worldly just by you just have picked a different genre to be worldly in than what your kids are choosing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you may be super worldly as regards what you want your house to look like, what you want your, what kind of what you're trying to achieve with the way you dress or the car you drive or the way that you
how you want to be
present
admired.
yourself. Like, you may be super worldly as regards looking like a Christian mom who's got it all together, right?
Yep.
Like, you could be very worldly in that way. And so your kids could imitate you, but choose a different world that they wanted to look good in. Right? They're just choosing something else. And I think it's just the heart of being a Christian, is that over and over and over again, we don't belong to ourselves, but we belong to Jesus. That we have to be submitting everything to, it's not just about, it's not.
I think this is weird. I feel like maybe feels like it's changing the subject, but I don't think it is. I think that there is a huge difference in parenting as if you are the legislator making rules for the public, and that's your kids. Like, we have a new ordinance, there's a new regulation, there are new laws in town, you're going to get a parking ticket if you go over there, and I'm the boss, and here's how we're going to do this. Where basically you're creating this culture of bossiness and then compliance or resentment, or partial compliance, partial resentment, like in the kids, versus raising your kids to be your friends. And I feel like I see these things from moms that are sort of like, I'm sorry, I am not your friend, I am your mother. And yes, that's true when your kids are 4 or whatever.
It's not true. It should never be true with that tone of voice.
No, and the thing is like, you actually are raising them to be your friends, and you want to be able to talk to them like you talk to friends. And yes, there is a time when they're little that they need the rules and the regulations, and they need to be taught to obey, and they have to learn what things are out of bounds, and they need to learn respect and everything else. But when you can talk to your kids because we're all on the same team and we like each other and we're friends, then you're pulling them into your world of what you love, rather than bossing them and giving them infractions and sending them to their room and telling them that, they did it again and everything. Like, there's this kind of adversarial, sometimes flagrant, sometimes just subtle adversarial relationship between the parents and the kids, where you're not going to have the kind of relationship where they're interested in what you love or what you're loyal to or anything else. And it's not to say that you should be a slack parent, because the kids need parenting.
I actually think the heart, what you were just saying about I'm not your friend, is that you should be your kid's friend, but you may have a total false idea of what friendship is.
It shouldn't be,
because friendship, even with an adult friend, that your job is not to ignore sin, and like friends are accountability and companionship and fellowship as you pursue Christ. So if you are like, I am not a friend to my children, well, something's really broken if you are not a companion, a friend, someone who's sharing fellowship as you pursue Christ. That's the whole point of being a parent.
And I do think friendship in a much more profound way than little girl dates and
friendship is not goobering around at a slumber party together.
Right. And I do think that in that sense, when you have a mom saying, I am sorry, I am not your friend. Okay, fine. Don't be that kind of a friend.
But also don't have your kids think that that's what friendship is.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that from the time our kids were really young, it was like you're pulling them into your life and your conversations and what you enjoy, and they're pulling you into theirs, and it shouldn't be this kind of like weird, I'm the sheriff in town kind of mood.
and also not where the kids develop this whole like, oh, it's the parents who are coming by to stop all the fun and do all the you don't want that kind of adversarial.
If they're raised in a place where it's kind of like here at home, there's nothing but lines that I'm constantly stepping over and infractions that I'm committing and everything. That's what home is like. And then they sort of look out into the world where it's like, and look at all the fun that they're having over there, where everybody is like carefree.
Well, there I'm invited to be a friend of people without all this rebuke and chastisement.
Right. And so we probably said this before, but I think that one of the most valuable things about Sabbath dinner from the time our kids were little, like they were all just raised with this, going to mom and dad's, and it's cousins and aunts and uncles, and it's food and wine and fellowship and fun. And I thought at the time, like a kid who's raised with that, if they look over at the world of a frat party where you have to turn the lights off and the music up so that everyone can
get drunk so it can be fun.
Yeah, so everyone can pretend like we're having this great time. Hopefully they'll be able to see that for the fake attempt that it is. When you've shown them
it's
the
counterfeit
thing. Yeah.
It is the counterfeit. Like when you were walking on the street of New York and you were offered a Coach bag.
Yes.
You would be like, that's not the real one.
It's not the one. Mm-hmm. And so you want them raised.
I actually know what leather is like.
Yeah. And it's not this weird thing that you're handing me. And so I do think that especially with the kind of home that you want to have should make it clear that world that's being, offered to them is really hollow and empty and sad, because they know what the reality
Real joy
is like.
Yeah.
And so obviously, like, we're big on talking about discipline and respect and making your kids obey and not letting them be little horror shows, and and all of that is totally true, but you have to not have it be only that in your house. It needs to be like sin is taken care of, sin is confessed, joy is restored, and then we're all friends.
Well, and let's just bring this up here. And that is that taste and see that the Lord is good. Like, your children should be tasting and seeing that the Lord is good all their lives. Like, it should taste and it should look like a place of joy. And one of them, probably the most, totally, I think one of the most effective things that the gay community has done is this loving acceptance, the feeling that this is where love is. Yeah. This is where acceptance is. This is where you could find belonging. And the idea that you, with all of your problems, would be welcome here. And I think Rosaria makes I think in her, what is it? Secret Thoughts of an Unlikely Convert, or whatever that in her initial book. Yeah. I think that's a big part of what she's talking about, is the hospitality of the gay community was because it was so accepting and loving.
And the thing is, if you don't know that is such a shallow, fake sham because you haven't seen the real thing, you could fall for it.
That's the realist. But I'm saying, don't be raising children who are starved for acceptance, for love, for people who actually see them and delight in them.
Right.
Even with their foibles and their weaknesses. Like, we know that we all have weaknesses, and yet we really should love each other.
And it shouldn't be like, well, there was my grouchy, distant dad and my judgy, panicky mom.
Yeah, but on the other hand, here's the gay community willing to be reasonable and accepting.
Arms.
Yeah, realize that your kids should recognize, like, I think it's the, what is this? Is the Methodist church, the Stone Church? Yeah, Methodist. In our town, they had a sign up that I was like, woo! That one looks hotter than usual. Like, that's one that gives me the back away slowly from this building feeling. They always have something ripe out on their reader board, but they had for Pride Month the Pride flag, and then God is love is love.
Oh.
And I was like, well, let's all just take a moment and say that this one's just overt blasphemy.
And,
I mean, like, this is just...
It should be clear that the whole woke leftist LGBT everything mob has basically said, we're going to have the rules be opposite day all the time about what words mean. So hate is actually, trying to have a standard. That's hate. Love is actually perverse, desires. That's love. Yet, like, they've taken everything and flipped it, and you need to have your kids so familiar with the truth that is just an obvious an obvious lie. And if you just have a life that is full of rules and regulations and, constant criticism,
joyless striving,
high standards that are kind of impossible to ever please mom or dad or anything, like, it's just, you want to have, like, we talked about this when we were doing the mothering thing, that the Garden of Eden, when God put man in the Garden of Eden, it was perfect. You have a perfect man in a perfect world, and it is very important, I think, that there are lines, and there are things that are not allowed, and hard lines. Like, your kids need to know that there are certain things.
Clear lines.
We do not tolerate that. You may not throw tantrums. You may not lie. You may not, like, God's law is real and it is honored in this family. And so there are things that are forbidden, but that was one tree in a beautiful garden. And so your house should have a similar proportion, I think, of, like, it should have there are the forbidden. We don't tolerate that. That is something that can't happen here, or as soon as it does, we deal with it and then we restore fellowship. But they should grow up in, like, a delightful environment.
Well, Dad was using this analogy recently, just about that the walls around the garden protect the garden, but they aren't the garden.
Right.
The walls are, like, the walls are there to defend something. The rules are there to defend something that are not the rules, right? Like, the hard boundaries are so that there can be delightful things inside. And if you don't have any of the boundaries, well, then there's a lot of predators and other things that come in and destroy it.
Right.
So you need both of those things. But Christian parents who think boundaries are important can oftentimes forget that the whole reason they're there is for the garden inside. The whole reason we have a wall is that we might have beauty and fellowship and joy and all of these things inside of it.
And they can treat it like the wall is here so my kids will never be able to get out and they won't know what's on the other side.
Right. The other, like, we said in a podcast a couple of times ago about not being the person who's always busy with the bad news of today and the evil doings of others. That is a mother who has neglected entirely her job, which is to be making a beautiful garden inside the walls.
Right.
And is instead fascinated with everything that's happening.
She's up on top with a spyglass.
With a spyglass, yelling to the people back inside, look,
Stay
there's
down.
a horrible rat infestation on here. And, like, let me tell you, let me broadcast live to those who are in the garden.
And
what dark deeds are going on outside.
We're going to talk about it out there, and I'm going to be telling you your whole life how bad it is, so that you'll never want to go out there.
But one thing that you will not have ever found out about is that there's actually a joyful life inside the garden.
Right.
There's something here that's sweet.
Yeah.
And you'll be so ill-informed about what can be done inside the garden that the only life you can imagine is what's happening outside of it. Because that's what everyone's talking about.
If I was to go out and do all that, then my mom would be quite fascinated with my activities.
One thing Mom loves the most most is to hear about horrible things that happen.
Honestly, I think sometimes that's, you know, like you have missionary kids and pastors' kids that are so famous for being terrible. And you wonder if it's like, well, they spent all their life with their dad only ever pays attention to the really messed up, lost people.
All we care about is those people.
Do the kids get the idea that if I want dad's attention, I guess I'm going to have to flame off?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's my one shot. My one shot is to be out there where they're always looking. But the point is, orient yourself to the idea of making beautiful things in the safe confines. Your children's loyalty is won by tasting and seeing that the Lord is good, because that's how they themselves have a testimony to God's kindness and his mercy and his forgiveness. Because a Christian kid in a Christian home that's operating in a healthy way has a first-hand view over and over and over of how sin breaks fellowship and how Christ restores it, how forgiveness restores it. There's no amount of oblivion to the impact of sin. Like, the sweeter the family home is, the clearer the reality of sin is.
Yeah.
There's no sheltering kids from that understanding, because the sin is in our hearts, which means no matter how sweet the fellowship, the sin will still make itself known.
Rear its head.
It will make itself known. And when everybody together recognizes, well, that's the worst, it's a really great place to be.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so now
we talked ourselves out about that.
Yeah, so what we're saying is both take the threat very seriously, and also don't take it as the one thing you ought to be worrying about all the time. It's like, have some confidence in the Lord that he will protect your children as you faithfully try to honor him.
Do what he says.
That's a big step. Well, yes, that's good. All right, any hot tips? I have one.
Good.
What is it? This was a tip from a friend who told me this existed. If you have a big family, you will care. It's a waffle iron.
Okay.
I make waffles, sourdough waffles.
Mm-hmm.
This is really probably the tip. The King Arthur, speaking of wokey McWoke face, places that have destroyed what once was a good.
Yeah.
Man, they used to be good, and now all they are is proactively gross. But anyways, their recipe for sourdough waffles or pancakes remains uncorrupted. It is magnificent. But I make that sometimes, and it's also super easy, which is what's great, because you mix it the night before, and then in the morning you add eggs and butter and stuff, and it's ready.
Yeah.
But it's a Cuisinart double-sided waffle iron, so it makes 2 waffles at one time. 2 of the big Belgian waffles.
Well, that is handy.
Mm-hmm. So since you should be making these sourdough waffles sometimes,
just don't put rainbow sprinkles on them.
No,
and it'll
don't
be all
do
right.
that. We buy the Swedish pearl sugar. You scatter some sugar in the waffle iron, and then you just put some fruit with it or something. It's super delicious.
Does sound fabulous.
Big tip, and it's just really was right on topic.
It was
exactly what we're talking about.
Waffles.
Well, actually, it might be on topic if you really leap to the taste and see that the Lord is good. All right, guys. Until next time. Bye-bye.